Hey everyone, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I am your host, G1. As always, I hope you are having a good week. I have had a tiring one. Lots of things going on that are pulling me in a lot of directions, and it's got me a bit on the low energy side. So I apologize ahead of time if the show sounds maybe a little redundant or maybe something you've already heard me talk about before in the past. That's okay. We got some things going on in the news that well, it made me kind of want to re-hit some areas that I've talked about before because I thought it was very relevant. Anyway, we'll start off though with some good news. The SCOTUS has struck down the bump stock ban from the ATF. This is a fantastic bit of news, as it should lead to additional rulings from the ATF being struck down as well. This is because the bump stock ban was, well, it was kind of a test case for ATF. Once it went into place and they began to kind of navigate the legal waters of it and see what the response was going to be, they began to use the exact same language to formulate other bans on items that, well, they're clearly not in violation of the NFA, but nonetheless, ATF wanted to ban them. So they used this same ruling and just expanded on it. So this ruling from SCOTUS should kill those bans as well. So the whole effort on pistol braces and the forced reset triggers and all of that should be knocked out. That all should be withdrawn. That should be sort of in that kind of nonsense. But that remains to be seen. ATF is likely to take the position that, well, these bans they'll need to be litigated separately. However, legally they really don't have a leg to stand on there. Now that this ruling has come down. But we'll have to see how that plays out. I think it's a win for us, and I felt like it needed to be mentioned. So that's refreshing. It's good to see one for the good guys. Get one in the win column. I just got done watching the latest episode of Judge Napolitano on his YouTube channel, where he interviews Pepe Escobar, the international journalist. I believe he's from Brazil. And the topic being the goings on in Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. And recently, Napolitano and a few others were actually traveling to Russia, or intending to travel to Russia, and had the trip canceled and by the State Department. The State Department stepped in and said, you can't go. Which is interesting in and of itself, but we'll move on from that and just get to the show. Their consensus is that Europe is preparing for war with Russia, and Russia is making moves and sending very careful signals that they are aware of this and that they are prepared to respond, and that response will likely escalate to a nuclear strike. Now, that is, of course, terrifying. However, I see no reason to disagree with their assessment. I think it's very close odds that we see this happen very short term, potentially before the end of the year even. Wow. Wow. I don't know if you guys picked that up, but as I'm recording this show, screeching over my house, an Air Force jet, doing the local training run. They like to fly between the mountains here in Appalachistan to train for low level flight, and it can be quite surprising. But anyway, today Biden signed an agreement with Zelensky that the media propagandists are saying binds the next president into supporting Ukraine with arms and money, but it does stop short of promising troops. Well, that is bogus. This is not a treaty. It's an agreement, and therefore it has no legal binding on the next president to do anything. The next president can immediately withdraw from that agreement if they choose to do so, as it's not something that's been ratified and approved by Congress, and therefore it has no force of law. The president doesn't make law, despite what he might think. So that's all bogus. It's all bogus. As it stands, if the judge and Pepe are right, that may not even be in question anyway, due to the fact that it's very likely that Zelensky and the current political entity known as Ukraine will likely not even be in power anyway. It seems that there's serious talks in Russia about a decapitation strike on Kyiv and a significant stepping up in strikes on infrastructure and command and control networks that are taking place. And the question circling the streets of Moscow is, why don't we finish this? Why don't we launch the decapitation strike? Take out their leadership. Just take some of the gloves off and go full on. We've been holding back, and so far this is just a special operation. It's not really a war. Well, why isn't it not a war? Let's finish it. That's the mood on the street in Moscow. And that's good news, honestly. The sooner the Russians are marching down the streets of Kyiv, the better this will be for us. This whole endeavor is a constant drain on our resources and our wealth, and we cannot continue to support Ukraine in their endeavor. The problem that we face is what happens if it does end soon. What are the downstream ramifications of this conflict on our political landscape? And do the implications of a potential action by the EU, with or without nukes, have any real weight to them? And I think they do. I think the EU is seeing a potential conflict as a way to extract itself out of the dead end that it's walked itself into. The leadership of Europe want a larger conflict to focus their populations into. They believe it will be good for business or good. Well, honestly, let's get cold about it. As cold as they are, they want a conflict that will grind their populations down to a much lower level that they believe will be manageable and more easily controlled. That's really the bottom line to it. The complete lunatics running Europe want mass destruction. And the satanic pedos running the U.S. want that as well. They just want it more in Russia and the EU because in their minds it paves the way for them to become completely dominant, even more dominant than the U.S. already is. The wild card in all of this is China. China wants everyone weak and burning so they can be ascended. And there's no doubt that the Chinese are influencing the satanic elite in the U.S., but I will leave it up to you to draw the line on how significant that influence is. It could be large. It could be playing a major role in how the elite are acting, or it could be very minor, and it just happens to align with the elites and their own agenda here. But you make the call. You're savvy. I know you can see through and read between the lines of what I'm putting down here. So what does it all mean for you and me? Well, I think you have to be ready for the distinct possibility that nukes are going to fly. I don't think this will be a large-scale exchange, however. I think the demonstration that Putin had a few weeks back, the Russian tactical nuclear weapon systems, was a very specific signal along with some of the personnel moves that have recently been made. And it said, hey, numbnuts, we're not messing around here, and we're prepared to light some of you fools up, if need be, on a low-level way to emphasize the point. Now, our leaders, as I said, are disregarding this warning. So it's very likely that should things go hot, those smaller rockets will fly for a short time at least. I think there will be a short exchange and then a pause to see if that has the intended effect. And I think you'll see this play out in Ukraine directly so that NATO soil will not be hit and thus not trigger Article 5. But I don't think it stops there, however. I suspect what we will see here in the United States will be some kind of crippling strike, either an EMP type system or event, or potentially, and probably more likely, hackers combined with special ops. The spec ops who are already here, and they'll hit our infrastructure. Either way, it's going to cause a lot of chaos. That's the downstream effect for us. This chaos that is going to hit the streets. And There's no real way to tell how long that will last. We can only guesstimate the impact and the scope of this kind of effort. High end, we're out for years. Low end, we're probably out for months. Either way, you need to be working on finalizing your preparations and planning for this distinct possibility. Now, there's a lot of overlap with other kinds of potential disasters and quite honestly, political violence, so it's not a far-fetched waste of time and resources. It's something that you should be doing anyway. This is just yet another reason on top of the many others to be focusing on these things. But do the things that you can control and just be ready to sort out the ones that you don't know or you can't control. Okay? Learn things, have tools, those kind of things. Be prepared and be flexible to address the things that you may not be able to really foresee coming. Now, when I give advice on these kind of things, I highlight 7 areas generally. These are the things that I focus on. And each of these areas are identified as a type of security. And I define security to mean that you have a long-term source or control in this area that is as close to 100% independent of outside requirements as you can get. You're probably not going to get absolutely 100% independent on all of these things, but just as much as you can get. And that means that you have layers and redundancy, for example. When we talk about water, let's say, perhaps you've got a spring or maybe you've got a river that's very close by that you have, unfettered access to. And that means you have a lifetime supply of water. Well, that's water security. You've reached 100% water security there. So here are the areas that I talk about. Water security, as I mentioned, and I include in that sanitation and hygiene as well. You're not just getting drinking water for the day. You need drinking water to wash yourself, drinking water to get rid of your waste and your trash and those kind of things. So more than just your drinking, okay? So that's all in one group. Physical or shelter security. Physical and shelter security. So this is your personal security, your family's security, that kind of thing, as well as your home or maybe even down to a tarp, what have you, whatever you're going to use for shelter there. Your food security, energy security, medical security, comms security, and economic security. Economic meaning that you have some means of trade or barter. When you have layers and redundancy here, then you can check off that box for that area. So start small with what you can afford and what you can store. You likely do not have time to get 100% secure for all of these areas. Just do the best that you can. Do what you can do, plan accordingly. For example, if you don't have a spring or a river for water, then make darn sure that you have containers and filtration gear so that you can filter water as you find it and store it and carry it. And that's something very easy that you can put together relatively inexpensively. I've been very happy with a lot of the filtration gear that's out on the market right now. The price has come down, and it's much more accessible and much easier to find than it used to be, 10, 15 years ago when I started doing a lot of like backpacking and things like that. But so that kind of stuff is out there relatively inexpensively. Make a list of these areas. I'd put those down one side of a page, and then for each of those areas, I would identify 3 different phases. And the first phase can be called priority. The second phase, the second column, is the short term, and the third is the long term. And the long term is that 100% security that we talked about. And then for each area and each phase, identify and write down what you think you're going to need or what you already have that fills that phase and completes that phase for you. And keep in mind your place of living and what you can store and what you can't. Will you have to leave this place that you're in? If so, can you move everything that you have on a short-term notice? Can you move now, maybe? Get out ahead of the event or prior to the end of the year. Can you make arrangements to get to a friend or a relative's place with all of your things, and that improves your physical security if something happens? Maintain some balance, though. You don't have to try and do everything all at once. Hit the easy ones, the low-hanging fruit first, and then get to the more difficult things. But also, don't be afraid to work multiple areas at the same time. Just do what you can do what you can manage. And often you can find that two or more areas might overlap some, and taking care of one achieves another. For example, if perhaps you're able to find another piece of property or another home to live in, something that improves your physical situation, and in so doing, you've got a well on that property. Well, now you've got a water source, so you've taken care of two of those things at one time. For example, there are other things that overlap like that. Now, this has been a long-term effort for a lot of you out there, so I'm preaching to the choir for many of you. But for some of us, however, or some of you out there, this is all very new, and they've not, maybe not put much thought into it. So I'm hoping to address more of these things over the next few weeks and go into a little more detail on them. I probably won't do an entire show on them, but just touch on little areas in every episode. But let me know in the comments if you want to see more of this kind of content. I'm putting this in here now because of the things that are going on, but also because of some of the people commented that they would like to know how I do things or how I think about these things, and wanted to have this information. So I put it in the show. And I know that there's so much of this information that's out there on the web, and were it not so important, I would just say, hey, look, there's people that have done this better than me and more extensively than I am, so go look at their things. Survival blog, for example. There's dozens of sources out there to get that information, but I wanted to at least give some input on this and try to simplify it for people, because the topic is so immense, and it can be drinking from a fire hose if you don't know how to navigate it. Over the years, I have narrowed down as much as I could and tried to simplify it just into those areas that I talked about there. And you can expand those things as you need. Maybe you think, well, because of potential nuclear action, well, maybe radiological protection is a good thing, and so that's part of your physical security. It's however you want to kind of define those and expand and contract them as needed. But I try to simplify this because it is so big, and if you just go out there and say, hey, go hit one of these other websites or one of these other places, these videos, and it just becomes this overwhelming thing, and that's not helping people. If you're new to this, you're trying to get going, you see the need, you're recently awakened, so to speak, to it. When you hit that overwhelming nature of these things that are out there, it just causes people to shut down. It's not helpful. So hopefully in the end, you're educated a little bit by this, and it helps you out a little bit. And honestly, hopefully we don't need most of this, and it's all just being overly cautious. But I don't think that's the case. Even if war in Europe doesn't happen, and they turn back from the cliff, we still have the most important election in over 100 years coming up, and that event, regardless of how it turns out, I think is going to lead to conflict, and it's going to give you a reason to be focused on all of these things, all on its own. So anyway, that is all I have time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the Mothership Dry Dock, and I will see you on the next episode.